show you how to separate your seedlings once you've gotten them started. So as you can see, these cell packs are pretty little. The roots are actually poking through the holes at the bottom, which means they definitely need to be separated. These probably should have been separated a few days ago before this started happening. So I'm going to show you two different methods of how to separate your seedlings. One is a little bit more aggressive and works, and the other is super gentle, and we actually discovered it by accident. And so before we get into it, I'd just like to talk a little bit about why we would want to separate our plants. The main reason is because in each of the little pots or cell packs, gardeners usually recommend that you put more than one seed in the pot. And the reason for that is because not all seeds are going to germinate. However, if you are like us with some new seeds this year, germination rate might be really high, in which case you're going to have multiple seeds coming up in a very small area. Most people recommend doing what they call thinning, which is you take the weaker of the two plants and you cut that one, basically destroying it and only letting the strongest one grow. We prefer to separate them because we want as many plants as possible. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how to separate plants when the roots have started growing together and are getting to a point where they are going to start competing for nutrients rather than having enough room to thrive. So the first one is the traditional method. So you're going to want to take your seedling packs and you're going to want to hold your baby plants very gently. You're going to turn it upside down and kind of just squeeze and tap while ever so gently pulling on the plants upside down. You're wanting to use gravity to your advantage. And as you can see, the roots are very strong and robust. They're almost even a bit spiderwebby, and you can see that they have started crawling around in circles. If the roots are allowed to go any further, the plants are going to be called root bound. And that's when the roots are so intertwined that they actually start to strangle the plant. So you need to separate them before your plants get root bound. And so as you can see, because they have both started winding around, it can be a little bit hard to separate them. So I'm going to show you the more traditional method of separating them, which is essentially, you can see we have 3 plants here. And you basically very gently pull them apart. So as you can see, you can almost feel the roots breaking in some places. So what we're going to do is we're going to poke a little hole in here, approximately the size of the roots, and we're going to place the roots inside. Now, we want the base of the plant to be at the same level as the soil around it. There are a few exceptions, such as when you're burying tomatoes, but we'll talk about that in a later video. A good rule of thumb is that the base of the plant should always be at ground level and not buried. And so that's really all it is to it. It looks pretty happy. So for a really hot sunny day, the plant might go into a bit of shock and start looking kind of droopy. It's a lot like in a first aid course, you learn that if people are in shock, you want to get them into the shade, cover them with a blanket, give them some water to drink. We're basically doing the same thing with the plants. Right now, however, it is not too hot, it's not too sunny, the plant's still pretty bouncy, so we're going to keep an eye on it, and for now it's probably fine. So after we have separated each of these plants the more traditional way, again, I can feel the roots kind of in some ways tearing, and I want to make sure that I'm gently untangling any of the leaves just to do the least amount of damage. And when I pull this plant out and I pull this plant out, there's all these roots down here that belonged to some of them, and we're not really sure who. So we're gonna, again, very gently put a hole in, get as many of the roots down as deep as possible, and bury the root ball up to the base of the plant, set it aside. This is, again, of course, where you want to make sure to have plenty of labels on hand, because otherwise you are going to get very confused. Et voila. And so like we just showed you, dry separating the roots is something that most people do. Most people aren't as gentle with their plants. However, it can lead your plant to go into shock. So if you take a look here, this right here is a good example of a plant going into shock. They are going to be fine. We're just going to give them some water and some warmth and some shade, and they'll be bright and perky by tomorrow morning. However, you can avoid that type of thing by doing the next method I'm going to show you, which we would call wet separation. And now the second method, we like to use water, and we just kind of really gently massage the soil out of the roots. It's hard to see, but you can slowly but surely feel the plants letting go of each other. I can slowly pull this one out with very little breaking compared to the other one. So that's the roots of this one, and I'm gonna kind of put him on the side here, and then I'll work these other two very slowly. So the nice thing about this method is that if any roots break, they are going to be less in shock simply because they're not out in the air. But also because you're getting rid of the soil that's binding them together. And if you pull very gently, very slowly, it's like you can almost feel at some point the living roots release. There's barely any breakage here. If you pull too fast, you will feel your plants break. But if you pull slowly enough and let the plants go in their own time, we have had the best transplanting success with this method. And so from here, again, you're gonna make a hole as deep as you can, and you're going to put your little roots down in and cover it up. That's one method for this. The other method, you can take some soil like this, add some water, and you can make what we affectionately refer to as a plant turd. We're basically covering up the roots into this soil ball here. As long as it has enough water around, you can just kind of roll it in your hand like this, and then you have this weird little plant turd, which, provided you have a deep enough hole, just kind of inserts and plugs in nicely like that, just like a transplant, and away you go. So I'm going to do that with the rest of them, and we'll come back in a moment. And so of course, when you're doing this kind of work, you also want to consider your setup of your space. It would be even more comfortable if I had some kind of desktop right here where I could either stand at it or sit at it comfortably, working right in front of me. It's a lot less comfortable when you're working down here like this. It was just easier for the purposes of this video, but if we were doing it for a long period of time, we would definitely be setting up some kind of table right here. Because you don't want to come out of a day of gardening where you're complaining about, oh, my back hurts, and oh, I'm so sore all over the place. Gardening should not make you feel that way if you're doing it right. We'll talk about proper movement in another video, and for now, just concentrate on staying comfortable. So thanks for joining us for today's seedling separation video. As you can see, all of our seedlings are happy and bouncy and looking forward to spreading their roots in their new homes. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you learned some stuff. We hope that overall you feel it is probably a little bit easier than you were expecting. So it is still a little bit too cold here in Ottawa to leave our plantlings outside overnight. So we are going to bring them inside into our cozy house, and we'll be bringing them back out again in the morning to continue getting them used to the outside sun as well as the outside temperatures. We're going to baby them a bit over the next while until they are ready to be transplanted outside into our garden after the last frost date. And we will be showing you that process as well. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for joining us. Happy gardening.